The wrong veteran to push. Harold Gramps Patterson was walking out of Murphy's hardware store with a bag of screws and a roll of electrical tape when Rex Thornton decided to make the biggest mistake of his life. The 80-year-old veteran was moving slowly, favoring his left leg where shrapnel from a Viet Cong mortar had torn through muscle and bone 55 years earlier, and Rex, president of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club and a man who measured his worth by how much fear he could inspire in others, saw an easy target for his particular brand of small-town intimidation. What Rex didn't know was that Gramps Patterson had spent 6 years in special forces during Vietnam, and more importantly, that half the men he'd served with were still alive, still dangerous, and still very protective of their brother-in-arms. "Move it, old man," Rex snarled, deliberately bumping into Gramps hard enough to send the elderly veteran stumbling into the brick wall of the hardware store. "Some of us got places to be." Gramps steadied himself against the wall, his weathered hands shaking slightly from the impact. At 80, he'd learned to pick his battles carefully, and a physical confrontation with a 200-pound biker half his age wasn't a fight he could win. "Sorry about that," Gramps said quietly, stepping aside to let Rex pass. But Rex wasn't finished. He'd noticed the small crowd of Saturday morning shoppers who'd stopped to watch the confrontation, and he had a reputation to maintain. "That's right, Pops. Know your place. This town belongs to the Iron Wolves now, not to washed-up old soldiers who can't even walk straight." Rex climbed onto his Harley-Davidson and roared away, leaving Gramps standing alone on the sidewalk while a dozen witnesses pretended they hadn't seen anything. The unwritten rule in Murphy Falls was simple: don't mess with the Iron Wolves unless you wanted your store windows broken or your car vandalized. What nobody noticed was the young man sitting in a pickup truck across the street, watching the entire confrontation with the kind of focused attention that comes from professional training. Staff Sergeant Michael Patterson, Gramps' grandson and an active-duty Green Beret, had driven up from Fort Bragg to help his grandfather with some home repairs, arriving just in time to see his 80-year-old grandfather get assaulted by a small-town thug. Mike pulled out his phone and made a very specific call to a very particular contact list. 1 hour later, Rex Thornton was holding court at Buzzard's Bar, regaling his fellow Iron Wolves with an embellished version of his encounter with the old veteran. The story had grown in the telling, transforming from a simple shove into an epic confrontation where Rex had single-handedly faced down a crazy old man who'd threatened him with a tire iron. "You should have seen him," Rex boasted to his club brothers, raising his beer bottle for emphasis. "Thought he was some kind of tough guy just because he wore a uniform 50 years ago. I showed him what real power looks like." The Iron Wolves laughed and cheered, feeding off their president's dominance display like hyenas celebrating a successful hunt. They were 15 strong, heavily armed, and absolutely convinced that their leather jackets and motorcycle engines made them the most dangerous men in 3 counties. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first sign of trouble came when the bar's music suddenly stopped. The second sign was the way conversations died as patrons noticed the men walking through the front door, 6 guys in jeans and work shirts who moved with the kind of coordinated precision that made smart people nervous. Rex turned around to see what had killed the party atmosphere and found himself face to face with men whose eyes held the specific type of coldness that comes from years of professionally applied violence. These weren't weekend warriors or wannabe tough guys. These were operators, and every predatory instinct Rex possessed was suddenly screaming warnings. "Rex Thornton?" asked the man in front, a compact Latino with gray in his beard and scars on his knuckles. "I'm Sergeant Major Carlos Rodriguez, retired Special Forces. We need to talk." "I don't know what you want, old man, but you're in the wrong place. This is Iron Wolves territory." Rodriguez smiled, and the expression was absolutely terrifying. "Actually, you're the one in the wrong place. See, about an hour ago, you put your hands on one of our brothers. Harold Patterson, Vietnam, 5th Special Forces Group. Ring any bells?" The third mistake Rex made, after picking on an elderly veteran and not recognizing the caliber of men walking into his bar, was assuming he could intimidate his way out of the situation. "Look, Grandpa, I don't know what fairy tale the old coot told you, but he got in my way and I moved him. That's life in the real world. Rodriguez stepped closer, and Rex suddenly realized that the other Iron Wolves had gone very quiet. His club brothers, who'd been so loud and aggressive 5 minutes earlier, were now studying their beer bottles with intense concentration. "Mr. Thornton, let me explain something about the real world. Harold Patterson spent 6 years in the jungle, leading reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. He's got more combat experience in his pinky finger than you have in your entire body. So what? That was 50 years ago. He's just an old man now." "You're right. He is an old man. An old man who earned the right to walk down any street in America without being assaulted by punk bikers who think leather jackets make them warriors." Rodriguez gestured toward his companions, who'd spread out around the bar with the casual efficiency of men who'd done this before. "Meet the boys. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Santos, Force Recon. Master Sergeant Tony Williams, Delta Force. Captain Jim Morrison, Army Rangers. Sergeant First Class Dave Chen, Special Operations. And Staff Sergeant Mike Patterson, you remember him? He's Harold's grandson." Rex felt his mouth go dry as he realized he'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a bar fight. "We're what you might call a mutual protection society," Rodriguez continued. "When someone messes with one of our brothers, we respond. Collectively." The fourth mistake Rex made was trying to rally his club members for support, only to discover that the Iron Wolves' reputation for toughness evaporated quickly when faced with actual professional soldiers. "Come on, guys," Rex said, his voice cracking slightly. "There's 15 of us and 6 of them." "Actually," Rodriguez said, checking his phone, "there's about to be more of us. I put out a call to all Special Forces veterans within a 2-hour drive. Word is spreading about what happened to Gramps Patterson." As if on cue, more men began filtering into the bar. Not just any men, but the kind who carried themselves with the particular confidence that comes from having survived multiple deployments in the world's worst places. They wore civilian clothes, but everything about their posture and movement screamed military training. Rex watched his numerical advantage disappear as veteran operators continued arriving, each one greeting Rodriguez with the casual familiarity of men who'd shared foxholes and trusted each other with their lives. 15 Iron Wolves, Rodriguez mused, looking around the bar. Versus, let's see, 23 Special Operations veterans with a combined total of, carry the one, about 300 combat deployments between us. He smiled again, and Rex realized he was in serious trouble. Those seem like pretty good odds. For us. The Iron Wolves were looking increasingly uncomfortable, their tough guy personas crumbling as they found themselves outnumbered by men whose casual demeanor somehow made them more intimidating than any amount of shouting or posturing. "Now," Rodriguez said, "here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk over to Harold Patterson's house, and you're going to apologize. Sincerely. For putting your hands on a man who's earned more respect than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. And if I don't?" Rodriguez looked around at his brothers in arms, men who'd spent decades perfecting the art of violence in defense of American interests. "Mr. Thornton, do you really want to find out what 23 Special Operations veterans consider appropriate justice for someone who assaults an 80-year-old combat veteran?" The walk to Gramps Patterson's house was the longest quarter-mile of Rex Thornton's life. Behind him, a convoy of pickup trucks and motorcycles carried 24 men who dropped everything to defend the honor of a brother they'd never met but whose service they respected absolutely. Gramps was sitting on his front porch, working on the electrical repair he'd bought supplies for earlier, when the motorcade pulled up to his modest house. He looked up with mild curiosity as Rex climbed off his Harley and walked slowly toward the porch. "Mr. Patterson," Rex began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I came to apologize. For what I did earlier. At the hardware store." Gramps set down his tools and studied the young man standing in his front yard, surrounded by an army of veterans who'd come to settle a score. "That's nice of you, son. But why the change of heart?" Rex glanced back at the crowd of operators watching his every move with professional attention. "Your grandson and his friends helped me understand the error of my ways." Gramps smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Michael's a good boy. Takes after his grandfather. He paused, enjoying the moment. Apology accepted, son. But I've got a feeling you learned something more important than just saying sorry. Yes, sir. I learned that some people have earned respect that goes deeper than anything I'll ever understand. Rodriguez stepped forward, having followed the convoy to witness the conclusion of their mission. Mr. Patterson, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Sergeant Major Carlos Rodriguez, 5th Group, retired. Gramps stood up, his bearing shifting subtly as he recognized a fellow warrior. Sergeant Major. Thank you for looking out for an old soldier. No thanks necessary, sir. We take care of our own. Rex Thornton drove away from Harold Patterson's house a different man than the one who'd shoved an elderly veteran outside a hardware store. He'd learned that real power doesn't come from intimidation or leather jackets or motorcycle engines. It comes from earning the respect of people who matter, and from being part of something larger than yourself. The Iron Wolves disbanded quietly over the following months, their members drifting away to find other ways to feel important. Rex himself eventually moved to another state, where he got a job, stayed out of trouble, and never again made the mistake of assuming that age made someone weak or that service made someone irrelevant. Gramps Patterson continued his electrical repairs, but from that day forward, he never walked alone in Murphy Falls. There was always someone nearby, a veteran, a neighbor, or just a citizen who'd heard the story and understood that some people had earned the right to be treated with dignity. And Staff Sergeant Mike Patterson drove back to Fort Bragg with a new appreciation for the network of brotherhood that connected every man and woman who'd worn the uniform in service of something greater than themselves. He'd learned that you don't stop being a soldier when you take off the uniform, you just become a soldier who's responsible for protecting the soldiers who came before you. Because that's what brothers do. They show up when it matters, they stand together when challenged, and they never, ever let anyone mess with family.